Ray Dalio, one of the most influential investors in the world, just sent a clear message. America is entering a dangerous phase. And no, it's not just because of the economy, it's because of Trump's tariffs. While the American president reignites trade wars, slaps on record-breaking tariffs, and rattles the markets, Dalio is openly talking about decline, stagflation, and a global crisis. And the question is, if someone like Ray Dalio is starting to pull money out of the US, what should the rest of us be doing? In this video, I'll break down what's really happening behind the scenes, how Dalio is moving his money, and what he thinks about America's future after Trump's tariffs. Get ready, because it's not a hopeful outlook. But before we dive into what Ray Dalio thinks about Trump's tariffs and the future of America, let's take a step back. Who is this man really? Ray Dalio is one of the most influential and respected investors in the world. He's the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the largest hedge fund in history, managing over $100 billion in assets. But Dalio isn't just a fund manager. He's a macroeconomist, a strategist, and a student of historical cycles. His approach is different from most investors. He's not just trying to make money. He's trying to understand how the world works. When he speaks, Wall Street listens. Not because he follows trends, but because, more often than not, he's right. Like in 2008, when he predicted the financial collapse months before the subprime mortgage crisis hit. And now he's sounding another alarm. And this time, it's about America. Everything blew up on April 2nd, 2025. Donald Trump, back in office, announced the introduction of global-scale tariffs, a move more extreme than anything seen during the trade wars of his first term. He essentially imposed tariffs ranging from 10% to 50% on imports from over 180 countries, a flat 20% on the European Union, and a staggering additional 34% on China, pushing total duties on some products beyond 100%. The markets went into panic. The Dow Jones plummeted, and European and Asian exchanges lost billions in a matter of hours. But the real impact wasn't just financial, it was geopolitical. Several countries responded with retaliatory measures, while American companies, especially those reliant on imports, sounded the alarm. This will crush our margins and drive up prices for everyone. Trump then partially walked it back. On April 9th, he announced a 90-day temporary suspension, though he still kept a minimum 10% tariff across the board. A move that only deepened the uncertainty. Companies don't know whether to invest, relocate production, or raise prices. And it's in this climate of instability that Ray Dalio stepped in publicly, criticizing the White House's decisions and making bold moves with his investments. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, has voiced serious concerns about the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. According to Dalio, these measures pose a significant threat to the U.S. economy and the global economic order. In a recent interview, Dalio compared the impact of the tariffs to throwing stones into the productive system, emphasizing how such policies are disrupting global supply chains and increasing uncertainty for businesses. He also warned that America could face consequences worse than a recession as a result of these tariff policies, pointing to the risk of a debt crisis and the potential collapse of the global monetary system. Additionally, Dalio criticized the administration's protectionist stance, saying it is accelerating deglobalization and creating unsustainable trade imbalances that could lead to prolonged economic stagnation. He stressed the importance of reducing the trade deficit and promoting what he called a beautiful deleveraging in trade relations, particularly with China, in order to prevent further damage to the U.S. economy. In short, Ray Dalio sees Trump's tariff policies as a major threat, not just to the American economy, but to the stability of the global economic system. After Trump's tariff announcement, Ray Dalio and his Bridgewater team didn't just sit back and watch. On the contrary, they immediately adjusted their investment strategy, decisively shifting toward more defensive assets and reducing exposure to American risk. Their first concrete move? A reduction in exposure to U.S. assets. Bridgewater began offloading American stocks, especially those closely tied to the economic cycle, like industrials and tech. The reasoning was straightforward. If tariffs slow down the economy, those sectors are the first to suffer. Second move, defensive buys. Dalio focused on assets known for performing well during crises or inflation. Gold, the classic safe haven in turbulent times, inflation-linked bonds, and strong currencies like the Swiss franc. But there's more. Dalio continues to view China as a rising global power. Despite growing US-China tensions, he maintained, and in some cases even increased exposure to Chinese markets, particularly in strategic sectors. For him, the future is no longer America's alone to dominate. A multipolar system is emerging, with Asia playing a central role. Finally, Dalio reaffirmed a principle he holds dear. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially if that basket is called America. That's why Bridgewater has continued to diversify both geographically and across sectors, aiming to protect itself against any scenario, even the worst-case one. Visual summary: less U.S. equities, more gold and bonds. Exposure to emerging markets, especially China. Inflation protection, maximum global diversification. According to Ray Dalio, the United States is entering a dangerous historical phase. This isn't just a temporary economic downturn, it's something much deeper. Dalio openly talks about the decline of the American empire. He says we're witnessing the same patterns that marked the fall of great powers in the past. Internal divisions, loss of trust in leadership, extreme polarization, and growing economic instability. One of his main concerns is debt. The U.S. has reached unsustainable levels of public debt. And the government's response? Print more money and impose new tariffs. According to Dalio, this strategy will lead to stagflation, high inflation, low growth, and rising unemployment, a trap that's incredibly hard to escape. Then there's geopolitics. Trump's tariffs, especially against China, are just the tip of the iceberg. Dalio warns we're already in an economic Cold War, and the risk is that it could escalate into something far more real. Dalio isn't an alarmist, he's a realist. He says America still has time to change course, but it will take bold decisions, structural reforms, a new kind of leadership, less populist, more focused on long-term stability. And if that doesn't happen, Dalio believes we could see a global financial crisis, a collapse of the dollar, capital flight from the US, and a complete reshaping of the global balance of power, with China and emerging markets taking the lead. In short, Ray Dalio is telling us we're at a crossroads, and if we don't change direction, the road ahead is downhill, in the worst possible way. Okay, so what does Ray Dalio really expect from the future of the United States? Well, this is where things get serious. Dalio doesn't just see an economic problem. He sees a set of systemic issues all tangled together like a spiral. And the word he often uses to describe it is decline. In his view, the U.S. is entering the late stage of the empire cycle. Heavy debt, political polarization, social unrest, loss of trust in institutions, and now economic isolation too, thanks to tariffs and trade wars. The risk? Prolonged stagflation, high inflation, stalled economic growth, and no room for effective action from the Federal Reserve. And here's the thing, Dalio doesn't believe America's political class is dealing with these challenges the right way. In fact, he openly says there's a lack of long-term strategic vision. Everything is driven by short-term approval, fear, and knee-jerk reactions. In one of his latest talks, he said, "I don't see the reforms needed to change course, and the longer we wait, the more inevitable the crisis becomes." His prediction, if the U.S. doesn't change direction, we could see a dangerous combination: economic crisis, political instability, and a steady decline in America's global influence. Bottom line, Dalio isn't just worried about the markets. He's worried about the future of the entire American system.